In April, millions of tiny flowers spread over the Blackjack Hills and vast prairies in the Osage County of Oklahoma. There are Johnny Jump-Ups and Spring Beauties and Little Bluettes. The Osage writer John Joseph Matthews observed that the galaxy of petals makes it look as if the gods had left confetti. In May, when the coyotes howl beneath an unnervingly large moon, taller plants, such as the spiderworts and black-eyed Susans, begin to creep over the tinier blooms, stealing their light and water. The necks of the smaller flowers break and their petals flutter away, and before long they are buried underground. This is why the Osage Indians refer to May as the time of the flower-killing moon. Hello everyone, Brendan here, also known as Smoky Dude, and if you couldn't gather, today I'm covering another book, and today I am covering Killers of the Flower Moon by David Grann. Now, I generally don't cover nonfiction books on my channel. Now, I have done it before. I covered The Fight, which I read earlier this year. I thought it was pretty good, but I'm reading... But I did end up getting to read Killers of the Flower Moon because the movie recently came out, which I also saw, and if you want to wait till the end, I give some thoughts on that. But I was particularly interested in this book because it takes place in my home state of Oklahoma, and, well, I always got to rep my home state. I wanted to see what this book was about, and I was very pleased with it. This might be one of my favorite books of the year. It took some time, and I pestered my aunt in order to get the book back because I let her borrow it. But I got it back, and now I can talk about Killers of the Flower Moon. Now, while it can be difficult to talk about books that are based on true events, I mean, they're true stories. You can't just go, oh, well, that was unrealistic. But I'm glad to say that Killers of the Flower Moon joins such company as Into the Wild, which if you've never read that is an amazing book. But it definitely joins company such as Into the Wild as one of the finest nonfiction narrative books that I have read thus far in my 22 years of existence. Grann writes with the novelist's eye for storytelling. He creates an engaging narrative from the real-life story of the Osage murders and fills the story with interesting and strange personalities, who were real people, of course. My personal favorite character in the story that I thought was the most interesting was Tom White, the Texas Ranger turned Bureau of Investigation agent. This was before the FBI became a thing. But don't worry. My boy J. Edgar Hoover gets some screen time in this, and, well, if you know me very well, you know that I utterly despise that man. But I digress. I think Tom White was a really interesting character, interesting person from the sounds of this book. And to be honest, I think you could make a book just about him. I mean, he was a really interesting character. Interesting guy, I mean. He was the son of a Texas Ranger. He came from a long line of Texas Rangers. I mean, you know, get somebody on here and write a story about that. You know, David Grann. Get onto that Tom White biography. That'd be fantastic. But the story is mainly about the FBI, well, pre-FBI, investigating the Osage murders and ultimately getting down to the bottom of it. Killers of the Flower Moon is a classic American crime story. It talks about how greed can really destroy everyone around them, and it also explores how evil can infect even the most well-meaning of souls. I mean, we don't really know how complicit Ernest and Brian Burkhart were in their Uncle William Hale's plots, but Grann never stoops to judging the players in this story. He just merely shows them as they are, and mostly allows you to come to the conclusion that the book is trying to make about who they are. But he never grandstands to you. He just shows them as they are, and basically is like, okay, you can come up with your own explanations. Though, I will note, it is hard not to feel sorry for Molly, the wife of Ernest. She went through a lot of trauma in this story, and ultimately lost most of her family. Maybe, I think all of them, actually. It's really heartbreaking stuff, and also just how she was betrayed in such a horrifying manner. Wow, I am really leaning into what happened here. Grann's prose is smooth. Sometimes poetic, even. I mean, if you heard my reading of this book, which, don't worry, you don't have to look very far. I just read from the first page because I really liked the passage in the first page. Grann's language is concise, and it's to the point. I mean, I blew through this book in about 3 days, so it is not a difficult read. While he also really pulls out feelings of sadness, anger, you'll be probably indignant, completely disgusted, and ultimately feel some despair, feel the same despair that a lot of these Native American people felt, because they basically felt like they were being overlooked. And in many ways, they were. Killers of the Flower Moon is not only a true crime story, but it's also a lamentation on our nation's violent history and our nature. And it also talks about how we really have treated people who are of color not very nicely. Now, I know what you're thinking. Wow, Britain, that's a really hot take there. That's some profound insights. But let me tell you right now, this book really puts you in this perspective that America's history, pretty ugly. There have been some ugly moments anyway. I mean, there's even mentions of the Tulsa Race Massacre, which I did not even know about till I was in high school. Crazy stuff. But like the best stories, Killers of the Flower Moon forces us to look at our history, to look at our nature, and as the book says, history forces us to reckon with the choices of the past, and we have to face the consequences of those choices in our modern day. And it's a really, really sad one, because there's a lot of really sad stuff in here. Basically how the Native Americans had to practically beg the United States government in order to step in, and finally they did, because J. Edgar Hoover's ego was on the line, and he just was like, we should go investigate something. Here, Tom White, go check out what the Indians are doing. And I apologize to any natives who will watch this. But I would say that this book really puts into perspective that America has had some really ugly moments in the past, and this probably epitomizes one of the ugliest parts of our past. I mean, aside from the antebellum South and the 1921 Tulsa Race Riot Massacre, Oklahoma's had really nasty history with racism. I mean, to be honest, Killers of the Flower Moon was a difficult story. It's not a fun one by any means. It's a really sad story by all means. But I think it is a worthy one to tell. It's one that I wish could be talked about as a story of the past, a warning for us, a cautionary tale to not repeat the same bad choices that these men ended up making in this story. But sadly, considering the continuing history of racial violence in this country and its ramifications on our history, it's still a scar that we have to deal with to this very day. I wish Killers of the Flower Moon was not as relevant as it is, but yet here we are. It's a really sad story, but it's a very beautifully written book. I think that David Grann did a really good job with this book. It's written very well. It's researched impeccably. I mean, there's even a moment where he talks to a teacher who teaches at my college where I go to now. Crazy. I was reading it and I was like, wow, that's nuts. And it's just go read it. I think it's a fantastic book. It's again one of my favorites of the year so far. Go check it out. So I also saw the film recently of Killers of the Flower Moon. Martin Scorsese came back, filmed it here, as a matter of fact, which was really awesome. I've actually talked with some people. I met some people who worked on the film, and it was great. What did I think of the movie? Not one of Scorsese's best, I would say. I've heard some people say it's one of Scorsese's best. I don't know if this film really cracks my top 5 of his movies, but it's not bad at all. I think it's pretty good. Though, to be honest, when I walked out of the movie theater, when I saw Killers of the Flower Moon, the first thing I remember saying to my dad was, this probably should have been a miniseries, because there is so much information in this that you could easily make a compelling miniseries from this story. I mean, you can follow it from the villain's perspective, you can follow it from the FBI's perspective. I was pretty disappointed in the movie for not having more characterization of Tom White, who was easily my favorite person in this story, who I thought was really the most interesting out of all of them. But what Marty and to be honest, I was kind of surprised because like everyone was talking so much shit about how this movie was 3.5 hours long, and I'm like, oh, that should be fine. They should cover this story pretty well. And I'll give it credit. It mostly gets everything right. I mean, there is some dramatic license. I mean, because they give more. It's more from the villain's perspective in the movie. Rather than the book, which is more just this is what happened, and here are the personalities involved, and here's how they caught those people. I mean, really, to be fair, Martin Scorsese likes to explore dark, complicated characters, so it kind of makes sense to me that he really went with the perspective of the Burkharts and William Hale, because that's generally what he's interested in. But when I watched this, I thought, man, this could have been a really good, like, couple-episode miniseries that was on HBO or something like that. Get some really great actors in there. You could do it. I really think you could. There are still some really strong performances from Robert De Niro as William Hale. He's fantastic in the role. I mean, of course, Robert De Niro is one of the best actors. He's still alive. I mean, he's ridiculously good. Leonardo DiCaprio's in it. First time that him and De Niro have worked together, I think, since This Boy's Life, which is a pretty underrated movie. Yeah, I thought Leo was great. He's a fantastic actor nonetheless. I really like how this movie somehow made Leonardo DiCaprio unappealing. He's just a great actor. I can't really blame him too much. He's just that good. Jesse Plemons is in it. If you don't know that name, he's Todd in Breaking Bad. He's gained some weight since then, though he has actually lost that weight, so good for you, man. He played Tom White, and again, I was a bit disappointed that his role was very minimized. And I was also kind of disappointed by the end, where it's almost this kind of radio show. I won't say too much, but I thought it was kind of heavy-handed. I remember something Jason said, which I'm sure he's just going to rub in the comment section, but he says, if you have a point in the story where you know what the people are trying to do, you failed. And I would agree with that sentiment. I know they were going for poignancy. It just didn't really grab me in the same way that the book did. And there's also a lot of stuff in the book that was left out in the movie, which I thought was unfortunate. Yeah. But I thought it was a good movie nonetheless, even though I have my criticisms of it. It's a fun one to go see. I definitely wouldn't go to see it as like a date movie in the same way I wouldn't suggest Scorsese films in general as good date films, but yeah. Go see it if you want. I'm not really gonna be too forceful. I think Scorsese has made better films like Goodfellas, Taxi Driver, Last Temptation of Christ, The Irishman, which he made 2019. Yeah, not really much else for me to say though, aside from Killers of the Flower Moon. Fantastic book. Check it out. Movie, you can watch that as well. It's pretty good. Scorsese, he doesn't usually go wrong. Not really much else for me to say. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter at SomeOkieDude. You can find me on Goodreads and Letterboxd, where I write reviews that are probably more coherent than the one you just heard right now. And you can find me on Discord and come talk to me. Feel free to do that. And yeah, read Killer of the Flower Moon. It's a really good book. It's really all I gotta say for today. So.